Today we're going to be adding some bias binding to an edge. So we would normally do this for, say, a neckline or an armhole, or even as a hem. So we're going to be attaching it as if it's going to be concealed, so we won't see the binding on the outside of the garment. So our first thing is we're going to open up our binding, line it up to the edge, and what we're aiming to do is we're aiming to stitch in this ditch, this fold line here. So I'm going to line it up. So I'm just going to get it started, just keeping it as straight as possible so that I am stitching in that fold line and keeping the edge of the bias binding lined up to the edge of my fabric. Just using a regular straight stitch. As we get down to the end, we can just cut off and trim. So we have attached the bias to the outside of the garment, but we want to end it so that the bias is on the inside. So our first step is to flip the bias, and we're going to fold it to the right hand side. And what we're going to do is we're going to stitch a line of understitching along this join line. The understitching is going to go through the bias and through the seam allowance, but not through the main part of the fabric. So I'm just going to line everything up. You want your understitching to be as close as possible to the edge and no more than 3 mil out. We also don't want to go over the edge. So understitching helps keep things under and gives you nice crisp lines. So just keep it nice and straight all the way along that edge till we get down to the end. So you can see now we have our main fabric and our bias with our line of understitching. We're now going to turn our bias completely to the underside of our fabric, and we're going to basically push up against this edge. So you can see that when it just folds over, it always wants to roll a little bit here. Sorry, there is a noisy crow outside my window, so that noise will probably come through. So we're going to push towards the seam. Obviously, if we were going to be doing this on a garment, we would also be able to iron this flat, and it would be a lot flatter. So we're just going to line it up along to the edge and start stitching. And I'm basically going to keep pushing the bias to go towards the right so that I can see the smallest amount possible or none of the main fabric. And come all the way down to the end. Lift, trim. So on the inside of the fabric we now have 2 lines of stitching, and we have some nice flat bias binding, and on the outside we have a nice flat edge along with 1 line of stitching. So clearly I've done my stitching in a contrast color to make it easier for you to see, but you could also, if you did this in a matching color, it would barely be visible. So it's a really nice way to finish off an edge.